Hello, my name is Sabrina Wilkes, and today I'd like to talk with you about worldwide clothing retailer Gap Incorporated and how they prioritize their corporate social responsibility in order to be ethical, fair, and source the best materials for their consumers. First, we'll look at an overview of Gap as a company and its place in the global market before moving into their corporate social responsibility policies, and then we'll close by comparing how well the company's actions align with those aforementioned policies. Let's begin with a high-level look at Gap's history and current subsidiaries. Gap began in 1969 by husband-wife duo Don and Doris Fisher, who wanted to open a denim jean retailer that offered inclusive sizing at an affordable price. In just 3 short years, Gap had 25 stores operating in the California area, and by 1987, they went global when Gap opened its first store in London. Over the next 40 years, Gap grew rapidly by promoting their clothing through popular media, with cameos in Back to the Future, Seinfeld, and the 100th anniversary cover of Vogue, wherein the cover models all wore white Gap shirts and jeans. Globally, the brand continued to grow as well, opening their first store in China in 2010. Just a few short years later, Gap made history when they raised their minimum wage to $10, the first company to do so, and a move that was endorsed publicly by former President Barack Obama. In 2019, the clothing conglomerate celebrated 50 years of consistent innovation, and since then they've only continued their path to success. In order to drive that success, Gap has also consistently prioritized the growth of its subsidiaries through various acquisitions and investment in its child companies. Less than 20 years after the retailer first opened their doors, Gap added its first subsidiary to the family when it purchased Banana Republic, a premier fashion clothier. In '94, Gap introduced the world to Old Navy in an effort to offer versatile clothing at an affordable price to consumers. While Gap had a few more acquisitions between 1994 to 2008, Athleta was the only one that stuck while others were ultimately sold off. Athleta filled the spot for trendy athleisure wear geared toward women, and its brand has remained successful through partnerships with prominent athletes like Allyson Felix and Simone Biles. Globally, Gap Incorporated has grown exponentially since its first London location was opened in 1987. As of 2021, Gap had more than 3,100 stores across their brand family up and running, and less than a quarter of them were even based in North America, where the company first began. In order to put that global presence in perspective, it's important to see the numbers as well. While Gap, seen here in the darkest blue, is outpaced yearly by larger, more premier retailers like Nordstrom's or Kohl's, the company still holds its own against more comparable competition like Levi Strauss and Urban Outfitters. Now that we've got a good grasp of Gap Incorporated as a company, we can dive into and assess their corporate social responsibility. But it's important to first understand what a corporate social responsibility, or CSR, is. Per Pacific Oaks College, CSR is really just a company's responsibility to act justly for their employees, customers, and the communities in which they serve. There are 4 main areas in which a company may prioritize their CSR: environmentally, ethically, philanthropically, and economically. Gap Incorporated CSR highlights 3 of these 4 areas. At Gap, their CSR is known as an ESG, or their Environmental, Social, and Governance Strategy, and it's the pillar by which they ground their business functions in order to act as ethically as they can in all respects. Through their ESG, Gap addresses issues like environmental sustainability, gender inequality, and adherence to strict business conduct, each of which we'll touch on further, starting with Gap's environmental commitments. The E part of ESG stands for environmental, and Gap makes no small commitment when it comes to delivering on this policy. Their idea is that a healthy planet is a human right. Part of this initiative involves a water stewardship program in which they ensure individuals in the communities they serve have access to clean water for both drinking and to bathe. Per official statements by Gap Incorporated, their goal is to provide clean water access to 2 million people by 2023, and they're on track to do just that. Gap also understands the need to address climate change, and they're doing so by committing to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. While these may seem like lofty goals, aiding the environment is just the first part of Gap's ESG. Socially, Gap goes out of the way to highlight the needs and rights of women and girls through initiatives like PACE, their Personal Advancement and Career Enhancement Program, created in 2007 to offer career and education opportunities. Further details regarding this program can be found on their website. Gap's intention was to empower 1 million women by this year, but through their continued efforts, the company was able to achieve that goal in 2021. In total, the program has reached and affected 4.5 million people in its global supply chain. At Gap, the belief is that good business can change the world, a mantra they exemplify through quality business conduct and corporate strategy. A main facet of good business conduct involves accountability, and Gap doesn't shy away from remaining honest to their stakeholders and customers. Via their website, one can find up-to-date information on their sustainability goals and whether they're reaching those goals. Information regarding Gap's PACE program can also be found there, as well as their equality and belonging statistics. Furthermore, Gap makes sure their leaders are the face of these commitments by outputting messages from key leadership, like their CEO and Chief Growth Transformation Officer. Gap makes it a clear priority for their employees to believe in these goals at every level. We spent the last few moments reviewing Gap Incorporated's corporate social responsibility policies and initiatives, or ESG, and while I'd love to champion this brand and say that it has always exemplified these goals, that would be entirely false. The company has been around for over 50 years, and like many others, it's had its fair share of missteps and mistakes ethically. The concept of a corporate social responsibility is relatively recent, so while it's commendable that Gap takes theirs so seriously, it's also important to understand why having an outstanding ESG matters so much to their brand. Let's take a look at those main policies again, but this time we'll review instances in which Gap fell short of their goals or missed the mark entirely. Starting this portion off on a positive note, per Gap's 2020 sustainability report, environmentally they're actually on a good track. The company and its subsidiaries has managed to put up big numbers in this category, like saving 402 million liters of water since 2018 through their Washwell program, and child company Banana Republic was able to sustainably source over 60% of their garment resources in 2020 as well. Another highlight is the company's goal to eliminate single-use plastics by 2030, and they're proof they're making headway there, as they've already saved on 8 million pounds of plastic packaging by simply implementing a more efficient folding procedure. In this facet, at least, Gap does still hold its own and adheres to its ESG. Unfortunately, Gap's steadfastness in adhering to their policies stops the environmental bit, and as helpful as their PACE program has been, when you look at Gap's history socially, it's clear to see why the program has been pushed so heavily. Based on a 2018 report by the International Labour Organization regarding Gap's supply chain, women from the same communities that PACE targets were time and again victims of gendered violence in a Gap workplace. Women workers are concentrated in short-term, low-skill, and low-wage positions, and were at daily risk of gender-based violence and harassment at work, found the ILO report. Retaliation against this treatment more often than not results in termination. The women that Gap employs in its global warehouses are, per the company, some of the most vulnerable and disadvantaged members of our society, and yet, despite Gap's attestations to the opposite, these women speak to the fact that the company treats them with little compassion and falls short on its promise to empower them. Culturally, complaints of the severity weren't found in Gap's Western workplaces, leading one to believe that the safety of women in those positions is more highly regarded than that of their Indian and Asian counterparts. Finally, Gap Incorporated's inability to deliver on its governance promises may be the company's most harmful CSR misalignment yet. Per an article by Common Dreams about 10 years ago at a Gap factory in Bangladesh, it was discovered that employees were forced to work 100-hour weeks under extreme duress and in abusive conditions, making less than 25 cents an hour. Their employees, mainly women, were routinely denied maternity leave and instead were forced to work while extremely far in their pregnancy. Gap's subsidiary, famed retailer Old Navy, received nearly 70% of their garments from this one factory. So when these despicable working conditions came to light, Gap chose to implement their governance initiative in response. Ever since these conditions were discovered in 2013, Gap Incorporated has worked hard to restore their image as it relates to labor conditions for their employees in places overseas like India. In recent years, conditions have vastly improved, though there's still a long way to go. And while employees in America may occasionally gripe over their labor conditions as well, it's worth noting that abuse of this kind was relegated to Gap's foreign operations, which makes one wonder again how inclusive the brand truly is and if their circle of ethics genuinely extends to their global partners. In stark contrast to the Old Navy scandal of 2013, Gap Incorporated has worked hard to turn their public image around. Gap now has a robust human rights policy aimed directly at the employees that work in their supply chain. Gap employs field teams to work closely with its overseas factories in order to promote and maintain equality and safety, ensuring that everyone is treated fairly. Part of their updated human rights policy also includes an updated Code of Vendor Conduct given to Gap suppliers. The Code of Vendor Conduct provides a framework outlining Gap standards on business and labor conduct for their supply chain partners to adhere to. Furthermore, Gap has goals to make this kind of employee support a standard practice in all of its vendor and supply locations, with a goal to have 100% participation in their Better Work programs by 2025. Gap Incorporated makes it a clear priority to be regarded as one of the most ethical retailers in the global market, and initiatives like those we've reviewed give the company the tools needed to achieve that public image. From Gap Incorporated's inception in the 1960s, fairness and inclusivity have been driving values behind the brand's success, and despite serious misconduct in the past, there are bright spots in Gap's future. There have been tangible wins over the last couple of years for Gap, thanks to the implementation of its CSR, like the continued growth of their PACE program, which now empowers over 1 million women and girls, its sustainability initiative regarding water stewardship, a program that saved over 11.3 billion liters of water in 2020, and a 50% reduction in their carbon emissions from 2015 to 2020. That being said, there's always room to grow in order for a company to be entirely ethical at every level of production, a feat yet unachieved by any global business. Even still, in an industry dominated by corrupt business practices and poor codes of conduct, it's a relief to know that at least one retailer is using their corporate status to be better stewards of the communities that help them keep the lights on. Thank you.